Today, I have the immense pleasure of speaking with Paul Van Deventer, who's the president CEO of MPI. We're going to talk about the challenge in the industry, about the workforce. We're going to talk about the role of association. We're going to talk about AI and what is changing in our industry. Fascinating conversation with Paul. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today, I'm very excited because his schedule is crazy, and I've been hoping for months to be able to have this conversation. He's changing the industry. He's leading the largest association in our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only President and CEO of MPI, Meeting Professionals International, Paul Van Deventer. Paul, how are you?
I am great, Eric. Always great to see you. And you always put a smile on my face with your great perspective on life. So it's nice to be with you.
Thank you. That's very kind. And I always have to pay attention to the way I pronounce your name, because I would say Van Deventer, but it's Van Deventer, right?
Well, that's a long story, but depends on what country I'm in. When I'm in Amsterdam and visiting the Dutch, they will tell me it's Van Deventer. But if you try to ask someone in the States to say that, you'll get nowhere. So we stick with Van Deventer in the States, which seems to be somewhat acceptable, and most
Right.
Americans can say it.
Wonderful. Paul, you have an amazing career. You, as I said, you're leading the largest association in our industry. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. But first thing first, what is your journey, and then how did you come to what you're doing today?
I am a great example of serendipitous occurrences leading to good fortune. There was not a master plan for me, other than to successfully get educated and stand on my own in my parents' eyes. I was raised the youngest of four boys. My mom and dad really built a strong household nucleus built around faith and family, education, and hard work. And as the youngest of those four, I was their trouble child. And I understood those principles, but I also stretched the boundaries a lot. So my brothers were all much more pragmatic, had visions of what they wanted to do in life, and were very successful in following those paths. I managed to get through university with a lot of encouragement, support, and grace from parents and administrators, and ended up in a sales type role coming out of school, and was blessed really. And that first organization was 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. And they had one of, today, I still believe, the best core training program for a young professional. And 40 years later, I lean into that training I got, and that sort of set me on a career path, really enjoying that sales business development type role, which then evolved into getting exposed and taking on some marketing roles. And I changed organizations into a great global organization, American Express, and they continued to train me, including putting me through a graduate program, and I got my MBA with their support, but also putting me in different areas of business that allow me to learn all the time. So none of it was typical path of vertical growth of, I'm going to be a marketer. So I go from an assistant brand manager to a brand manager to a division manager. I went all over the place. I was in sales, and then I was in advertising, and then I was in point of sale marketing, and then I was in publishing, and then I was in travel management, and I was all around. And then one day I got this great phone call, former colleague of mine, saying, "Hey, I got a call from a recruiter about a really interesting job. And I don't know if you'd be interested in it, but I think it's worth hearing them out." And that job was the role I'm in today. So 13 years ago, I talked to a recruiter, and they were telling me about MPI and telling me about what they were looking for. And I said to him, frankly, I'm not your person. I don't know anything about non-for-profits. I'm not familiar with MPI. I've never run an association, nor have I really been very affiliated with associations in my career. And he kind of laughed. He says, "That's what they're looking for. They're looking for an outsider who's done a lot of turnarounds, who's built businesses, who's going to come in with a fresh approach, and there's going to be no sacred cows." And by the way, it gives you your first CEO title. So that was kind of a selling point for me because at that point I realized I've been in all these different types of business and I've run divisions, but I've never actually had the ownership of the business. I've never been the CEO. And so I thought, hey, 3-year contract, I'll get in, I'll prove myself, and then I can go take that CEO title and run another business. And a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. I fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with MPI and its community. And 13 years later, I couldn't ask for a better opportunity. And I think I have the best job in the industry.
That's amazing. I remember that time. And what you were saying, by the way, the different experiences that you have makes me think of a business owner in our industry. They need to be able to touch
Yeah.
on so many different things. But one thing I'd like, before we continue the conversation, one question I had about the transition from corporate America to the nonprofit world, because there's obviously some difference where you have maybe more resources or things that have a different pace. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of stakeholder. I always say that I'm not kidding at all, that I have huge admiration for you and for the job you're having, because you have to make sure the team is going well. You have a board, you have other colleagues in the industry, and there's so many different aspects of it. It's takes a lot of patience and a lot of clarity. So what was the maybe one best thing that you experienced that you were not expecting, and one challenge that you had at the beginning, moving from corporate America to the association world?
Well, so I spent time in publicly traded companies. I spent time in private equity owned organizations. And then I came over here, and I think at the surface, people think nonprofit is not a business. And even that concept I had of I'll go be a CEO for 3 years and then go back to publicly traded companies. My mentors and friends are like, you'll never be able to come back because you worked to a nonprofit. What I realized really quickly, and it should be obvious to all of us, but it's not. There's no difference between a nonprofit and a private equity or a publicly traded company outside of their tax status. They are all businesses, and they all have to run themselves as effective businesses or they won't be there anymore. So if you look at the first surprise for me is I am running a business and I have to figure out what is the mission of this organization and the purpose that will drive the employees and staff to keep them motivated. And how do we have a financially sustainable model that ensures that this great organization that had been around at that point 40 years could be around another 40. So I quickly had to say, this is no different than running a business group in some of my other organizations or being part of a leadership team running a bigger company. I had to take the same strategic and tactical approaches. I had to have very strong operational planning. Where the differences started to settle in pretty quickly for me as I began to build out those business plans is something you talked about, the stakeholders. In a private equity company and a publicly traded, you have shareholders. In an association, you have members. So every member thinks they're the owner. And as opposed to a publicly traded company, the number of shares don't matter in their mind. If they're a member, they are an owner and they have the same influence as any other person. So you've got to get used to that very democratic understanding of you have this broad constituent group with many different needs, desires, and capabilities, but you have to treat them all equally and be sensitive to that when you're building your plans and driving change. And the other big difference in raise and the amount of volunteers we can get engaged. And the second thing that I realized is very different is in a publicly traded or private equity, you can go out and you can raise capital. With a nonprofit, you can't raise capital. But we have a different form of capital, which really I learned early on and I've leaned into, which is volunteerism. Our capital is the volunteer engagement that we have. The more we can bring in volunteers, the more hours they spend on helping our association and moving our association forward, the more successful we are as an organization. So that is a second differentiator. And then the third is the concept for me around how you engage and leverage a board. In private equity, you've got the owners send in your board and they manage the business and are analyzing you all the time. In publicly traded, the board is voted in, but they tend to be extremely stable. And every board member in both those cases, they all walk in with their first goal all consistent. It's the profitability of that company. They may have secondary goals beyond that, but they all walk in with that goal. What I learned quickly in a volunteer board is a few things. First, it changes constantly. Our average board term is just under 3 years. So you have this constant turnover, which means you're always starting back at the beginning of the book with many board members to talk about the journey. And at first that frustrated me, but then I've understood how to leverage it. I have fresh minds coming in all the time. I have new ideas. I have people pushing the envelope. And sometimes, especially if you're looking at me, 13 years of the job, it's good to have someone questioning anew and asking you to rethink because you can get stuck in your ways. So those to me are the three biggest differences between the for-profit and the non-for-profit world.
That's amazing. You were mentioning the volunteerism. That's really something that I clearly remember, obviously having been a volunteer with the organization, but when I had the opportunity to chair, going to, I think, over 30 chapters, it's fascinating, the enthusiasm, the energy, the ideas that you find in each chapter. Absolutely fascinating. And what I discover as well, in America, there's an association for everything. Where I'm from in Belgium is not exactly the same at all. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think what is your take on the role and what is the importance of associations in today's work environment?
Yeah, and yeah, interesting. When you asked me my journey, I commented that I hadn't been very engaged in associations during my career path. And now that I am deeply engaged, not just in MPI, but the association world, I wish I had leveraged them more. Because what's become very clear for me for professional associations, and there is a big delineation between trade and professional, but for a professional, which is individual member based, and that's what MPI is, it is the best place for ongoing career development and learning. If you talk about when I came in and I did a listening tour to learn about what MPI was and what MPI could do for people, what I kept hearing is two consistent refrains. One was MPI is my career home. And the second was, if it wasn't for MPI, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And those are powerful. Those are incredibly powerful statements. So I started to dig down. And what does it mean it's your career home? Well, in particular with event designers and event planners, they tend to work for organizations that don't really know what they do, and they don't know how to train them, and they don't have colleagues that they can learn from.
Yep.
So they have to go outside to do that. And they lean into an organization like MPI to share with others who are in a similar career path and with similar roles. And I think it's really an important value. And then if it's not for MPI, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. It builds off of that first theme a little bit, but more importantly, it's the networks that people build. And what they learned quickly early on is if I get involved with this association or an association, in our case, it's MPI, and then I get active, I'll start to build a network of friends. And lo and behold, like everything in life, I start to do business with them. People do business with those they trust and know. And the MPI network has provided countless individuals the opportunity to expand their business portfolio, find new jobs, and in many cases, I can't tell you how many, find their partner for life. Spouses have met at MPI chapter events and our annual conferences and built great relationships. So it's my career home. If it wasn't for MPI, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So those were really key learnings for me. And we've been focusing around that and looking at MPI as an adult education organization and looking at the importance of how we can help people advance their careers and better themselves personally as they go forward. So those are really important. So now what's the role today? Well, if you look at the industry we are in, it was devastated during the pandemic from a workforce perspective. From a revenue perspective, zip. It just, business shut down. Because the revenue shut down, the workforce had to get let go. And then it's come storming back, but the workforce was no longer there. And the people who were there pre-pandemic, in many cases, chose a different career path or retired, just or stopped working. So organizations have had to hire a tremendous amount of new people. If you look at some of the data out by organizations like Freeman, they're saying that over 70% of people are new to their role in the last 3 years in our industry. Our industry is 10 years younger than it was in 2019. So we've had a seismic multi-generational change in 3 years. And the biggest challenge is you lost all of this incredible retained learnings and career passion, and hospitality is about, from the heart. It's people who've been born with it and brought up with it. And we now have new people coming in. So you've got to teach them the skill set. You got to teach them the meaning of hospitality. And you have to give them opportunities to grow as leaders. So that's what an association can do. And that's what MPI is doing. We're developing courses and curriculum to help bring both sides of the equation in our ecosystem along, the planning and designing element, and then the venue and the DMO and hotelier side, because they're new on both sides of it. And so helping them along that path. And then through our volunteerism, providing more and more opportunities for immature professionals or newer professionals to actually get leadership opportunities in real life situations and to grow and to develop. So there is no more important time for an association than right now in our industry. And every time I'm out speaking, I tell the professionals that I'm talking to, I don't care which part of the alphabet it is, whether it's MPI or another organization, go join one. Get involved, get engaged, volunteer, be active, and there's going to be no quicker path to your success than doing that.
Absolutely. And you're talking about the professional home, and people would not be where they are today without MPI. I'm a living example of that. I've never been to any MPI meeting or any groups that I was volunteering in, or any World Education Conference without meeting somebody new, without having a new idea, without starting a new partnership. And obviously, all the opportunity that I had volunteering is just amazing. And the last thing, as you know, when I moved to the US and my lawyer asked me, you need to provide us with some letters to be recognized extraordinary ability. I said, okay. And I received letters, and he said, how do you know those people? I said, well, I just volunteer with them. We know each other, that's all. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's an amazing asset. And my friends, when I started doing this, would sit with me, my friends and family, would be like, I've never seen you so excited about something and so passionate. Yeah. What is it about this? And I couldn't quite put my hands around to describe it, other than say, some of you have gone to some of these major US universities with fanatical alumni associations. I said, it's like that. It's yes. The craziest alumni association you've ever been around, because it's about their professional life. And I'm just the caretaker for a period of time. But if you internally, they will critique it, and they will challenge it, and they will push me and our staff and each other to make it better and better. But if someone from the outside says one bad thing, they'll be cutting their knees off. They will go after them so fast, because this is their career home and they love it. They're so passionate about it. And I just love our ability to harness that passion and really to support it and reward them for that passion.
There's a French expression that said, qui aime bien, châtie bien. When you love something, you're going to be very hard on that thing, and you're going to ask for more than anything else. And that's definitely the case with the organization, with MPI.
Yeah, it's like family as well, right? Yeah, it's how you internally, you may challenge each other a lot and bicker, and you may even complain to your friends about some of your family. But if your friend complained back about someone in your family, you will come to their defense. Exactly. Immediately come to their defense.
I was stunned and very inspired at the last World Education Conference, WEC in Louisville. Not only, of course, with the great content, but there was like 50% of first-time attendees at the conference, which is crazy. So you're talking about the Freeman study that mentioned 70% of new people in our industry. In the meantime, the size of the industry is just gigantic, and you know the numbers more than I do. I think it's like $1.4 trillion is the impact
Yeah,
that we have.
that's the latest estimate is our global economic impact, direct dollars is 1.4 trillion, 25 million people directly employed in the industry. So bigger than the automotive industry, bigger than the electronics industry, but probably also still one of the biggest secrets in the world that it's an industry. Yeah, it's
Absolutely. So
yeah.
talking about this challenge, about the workforce, attracting new people and training new people, you mentioned the aspect of training, and as you know, also focusing on helping entrepreneurs to grow and manage their business better in our industry. What about attracting new talent in our industry, where we're competing? You know, all this image of if you watch every Netflix series, do you want to be a lawyer? You want to be in private equity? How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, we've got workforce development is the number one issue across our industry. And there's simplistically two kind of pillars to that workforce development. The first is how do you train and develop the current people we have employed? In particular, when 70% of them are new in their jobs. So that's a huge challenge unto itself. But you also have to, how do you keep the pipeline going to bring new talent in, new creative ideas, and to be able to build the bench for the future of our organization? So I talked a little bit earlier about a lot of what we're doing for the people in the industry and how an association can help. We are working with a number of other organizations to develop a much more focused, comprehensive external marketing plan about what our industry is and the career paths involved. As recently as 7 or 8 years ago, we couldn't tell you the numbers that we just talked about the economic scale and the jobs. Well, we now have that data. We now have to go deeper and say, what kind of jobs and careers can you actually have? If it's 25 million, what jobs, what does that mean to me as an individual? And how do we get the youth excited about that as a future career path? If you look at, in particular in North America, somewhat in Europe, there's some great organizations like Junior Achievement and DECA that help guide children in junior high and high school to think about career paths. There's guidance counselors that they can lean into. And this is a big generalization, but typically, if you think about the messaging from those types of organizations or guidance counselors, they tell young adults there's kind of three paths you can go in life. You can go a professional life. You can go to college, go to grad school, and become a professional like a lawyer or a doctor and be on a TV show, like you mentioned. If that's not right for you, then you can go into one of the trades. And there's incredibly good careers in trades, and you become a small business owner, and you can become very wealthy, and you can be successful running a carpenter business or a plumbing business or electrician. And then there's government. You know, you can go into the military, you can go to administration, you can work in all kinds of government and have a great career with amazing benefits and retire happy at the age of 45 and not work another day in your life. While you're thinking about those three, you need to pay for it. So go wait on tables or clean a room at a hotel or bartend. So hospitality is the funding of those three kind of career paths. What we have to get clear is hospitality unto itself is an amazing career path with all kinds of variation in it. Even the types we mentioned, you want to be an electrician or a carpenter, there's great career paths within our industry in the design of booths and trade show setups. If you want to be a lawyer or an accountant, there's incredible financial need and jobs. Your creative mind, there's huge opportunities for designers and marketers. So we have all of those avenues. What I also have found is you can also advance in this industry, I think, more than any other, with perhaps not an advanced degree. I've seen many people rise to the top in organizations in hospitality with a high school or high school equivalent degree by the learnings and experiences they've gotten and the willingness to work hard and to cross train and learn different skills and then move up. So we have a big task ahead of us, but it's a huge opportunity. And that opportunity will help us build the pipeline. And I think it also, if we're very intentional about it, if we're trying to find new people and we go into communities we haven't reached out before, it's going to allow us to diversify our workforce in ways we've never had done before.
Absolutely. I was listening to you. It reminds me when I first joined the industry, leaving the role of a marketing director in the stockbroker company. People said, "What? With your degree, you're going to do what?" And I just felt that that's exactly what I wanted to do. And that reminds me as well, a marketing teacher at the university. It was the fourth out of fifth year, so that the year before the last one. I clearly remember there was a person in the class asking the teacher, who, by the way, was the marketing director of Mitsubishi in Belgium. So he knew exactly the work environment. And that student asked him and said, "Sir, next year, you're going to hire people, but you're going to hire first people that have a college degree." And he looked at her, I remember, never forget, and he said, "Miss, the fact that next year you might be graduating is not necessarily a disadvantage." And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And don't get me wrong, and especially if my daughters are listening to this, I'm pushing them to do study, to have great degree, but that's just an opportunity to learn. And then the rest is totally open. And to your point, the industry, you can do any kind of career, but the opportunity to be there is just phenomenal. It's a people industry before anything else. So that leads me to the last topic that I'd like to talk about with you today, Paul. Cannot not avoid talking about it. It's AI. What is the role of AI in our industry? How do you see the change? What are still the opportunity? What are the things that are going to be replaced? I keep saying it is a people industry. There's some element of the relationship that AI will never replace. But anybody listening today, what is your take on the change in our industry with artificial intelligence?
A few initial thoughts, and these are kind of maybe overused little catchphrases right now, but I think they're important to keep in mind because there's still anxiety and fear of the unknown of AI. So the first one I hear a lot, and I think it's true, is that you will not be put out of work, but you'll be put out of work by someone who uses AI. So embrace it, learn from it, and bring it on. And the same applies to organizations. Organizations aren't going to be put out of business by AI, but they will be put out of business if they don't embrace it and leverage it. It's the latest productivity tool. It's the latest opportunity to be a better organization. So I think the first thing any organization needs to do is understand what AI is, build parameters around how your staff and teams can use AI, because you want to manage around the periphery of what the dangers could be, but make sure you're not leaving anything on the table in what it can do for you. So creating an awareness of it, creating policy around it, and then educating your team. So at MPI, as far as we know from the different companies that support us, we were the first association to put an actual AI policy in place. That was over a year ago. 2 years ago, we created an AI committee. They came up with ideas around how we can use it. Their first recommendation was, let's create a policy so people know what to do and we don't put our own data at risk. We don't have integrity issues. The second thing they came up with is we need to educate people so they're not afraid of it. And we created an AI certificate program, and the first people to take it were every one of our staff. We put our entire staff through and gave them a certificate in AI. And for me, the other, kind of key learning is the buzzword is AI right now. but we've been living with it for decades. Every time we Google something, that was AI. So there are many ways that it's been out there. It's clearly advanced and the technology has taken leaps forward, but let's not be so afraid of it. It's already been part of our life. So if you look at, you mentioned WEC a couple times. When we were building WEC, our search for content and our evaluation of potential content providers and speakers, AI played a key role in a lot of that and helped us curate. We get 500 to 800 different proposals a year for people who want to speak or provide education at our conference. It was very efficient in helping us define what the theme of the conference should be, and then what kind of education would support that, and then how that matches up to these proposals. And then from a attendee perspective, the number one desire right now of attendees is personalization. And they're getting more and more willing to share their data and their information if it drives to personalization. So we used AI to create curriculum channels and then allow for people to create a personal agenda as they came into the conference. We were just scratching at the surface. There's so much further we can go with this. But if you think about across business events and conferences, that's where it's going to play a huge role. The design of the conference itself and the personalization of the experience for the attendee. Easier to do with 100 people. You start to scale into 1,000-person conference, then a 10,000 person and 50,000 person. AI can now help you personalize that for 50,000 people. I talking to you today from San Diego, we just wrapped up Comic-Con, 150,000 people. Think about how AI can take that journey where there's hundreds of activations across the city in multiple venues and different speakers every day and different networking opportunities and meetup groups. AI can power the opportunity for you to build your schedule and your agenda just to make that experience so much better. So I'm thrilled by the opportunity it has. I'm glad that our team is embracing it the way they are. I'm excited by how our board has embraced us in using it. And I'm also making sure, though, that we're building the right security and protocols that we don't get caught out by the misuse of it. And that to me is also very important.
Fascinating what you're saying. I just finished reading Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of AI from Max Tegmark. And it's just fascinating how it putting everything in perspective, the different scenario. And to your point of using it, not being replaced by it, what I always share with the business owners, I'm talking about sales, for instance, when we're talking about AI, you have different tools that allow you to get to know the person that you're going to talk to, even if you've never met before. And you're never going to replace the face-to-face aspect. You're never going to replace that human aspect. And that will be maybe even more prevalent in this world than anything.
There's another interesting data point. I referenced some of the Freeman study earlier. They had another interesting fact they shared, which is, so we're now moving from the boomers dominating business to the biggest group and the most influential of the millennials. They're kind of the Z and Y, they're skipping over. So the millennials are now taking the reins from the boomers. But the perception of age equals resistance is actually a misnomer. And the example used when they do research is boomers were raised on the concept of when someone asks you to jump, you say how high. And so if we tell you to use AI, you're like, you might complain, but then, okay, you just do it. The millennials were raised on when someone says jump, they say why.
Why? Yeah.
And then you tell them why, and they say, I don't agree with you. So the actual embracing of the technology, interesting enough, is coming down from the older generations down in how it's utilized, which it was eye-opening for me when I heard that information from them.
That's awesome. Yeah, many examples come to mind with that. Well, I first of all, I want to thank you. I know you're extremely busy for taking the time to speak with me today. And
not as busy as you, Mr. Entrepreneur. Every time I see you've launched a new business.
Call it ADD, whatever it is. No, I love what I'm doing now because I'm leveraging all my experience. I'm helping people, and I do that in our industry. So Love
Great.
it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But just to finish with you, you never know who's listening. I always give an example of a friend who was on the podcast. He launched an airline based on the Cirrus Vision jet, Richard Kane. And the next thing you know, he told me afterwards somebody was listening and was negotiating 14 FBOs with him. So you never know who's
Wow.
listening. And I want to give you the opportunity to share with anybody who's listening now one dream that you have, professional and private. And if anybody's listening and can help you achieve that, to reach out to you. So, what would be a dream for you, something you want to achieve professionally and or privately?
I don't want to jinx myself for life right now, but I love what I do. I love this organization. So my dream is just to continue to be successful at MPI as long as I'm standing and I have that burning desire in me to give back to this organization, that the board wants me here and the members want me here. I think we're doing great. And that great work, the better we can do on that workforce development. So we're investing a lot in changing how we deliver and develop and deliver education. So how we do that, how we engage our community, user-generated content to make that education more valuable, that makes my job more fulfilling, if that's even possible, because I love it. And the other part of that is how we continue to engage the strength and power of this community to fight and stop human trafficking. So the more people can do to integrate that into every part of their life,
Yep.
and to make that a forefront opportunity to educate people about what human trafficking is, educate them on how to spot it, and educate them about what to do if they do spot it. Those are kind of my business dreams. Personal. 2.5 years ago, I became a grandpa. I've got 2 grandchildren now. I have 5 children, and only one has given me a grandkid. So I want the other 4 to start producing. I want lots of grandkids. I want lots of grandkids because that's my next stage in life, is just going to be to be Papa. So
Wonderful.
that's where I'm at.
Well, Papa Paul, thank you so much. Truly enjoy speaking with you as usual. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon. And if not, at IMEX in October, I believe.
Always a pleasure, Eric. And keep a hold tight on those envelopes.
That's another story.
Cheers.
Thank you. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I always enjoy our conversation and all the insights you're bringing. And for those who want to know more about the 3 envelope story, they can ask you or they can ask me. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please follow me on LinkedIn or go to the website eventbusinessformula.com, where you will find a lot of resources as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.